and welcome back to my channel, where I'm going to quickly explain the optional class features provided by Tasha's Cauldron of Everything for the Paladin class. If you did not see the video where I explain what the optional class features are, I highly recommend watching that before you watch this particular video, as it will cover the basics of what types of optional features there are, and go over some of the terms that I will be using in this video. To help you out, I've included a link to that video in the description below. The Paladin is a class that has gained 3 features that add options to existing features, while also gaining a 4th feature that is specifically allowing for retraining. In addition to new spells, the class gains new options for the fighting style feature and an enhancement to the channel divinity feature, rounding out the overall gains for the Paladin. As a result, a DM should have no issue with a player taking these options in place of existing ones, as they only provide new choices for existing features, but it might still be worth checking with your DM to see if they have any concerns. So let's begin to go over the new additions to existing features. The first new feature will be acquired at level 2 and is called Fighting Style Options. This feature provides 3 new fighting styles you can choose from, called Blessed Warrior, Blind Fighting, and Interception. The Blind Fighting and Interception feature changes are the exact same ones that the fighter gets for their fighting style options feature gains. I will still cover them in this particular video though, so don't worry. Blessed Warrior, on the other hand, is completely new. Let's first take a look at Blessed Warrior, which with this style gives you 2 additional clerical cantrips that you can add to your character sheet. These cantrips act as if they were paladin spells, and as a result, they will use the charisma spellcasting ability as opposed to the usual wisdom casting ability that the cleric has. Each time your character gains new levels, you can choose to swap one of these cantrips with another clerical cantrip of your choice, but you can only do one of them per level. To add the new cantrips to your character sheet here, all you have to do is go down to Spells, select the level to be equal to 0 because a cantrip is a level 0 spell, and select the source to be Cleric. And that will reduce the list of spells that you can see to be just that of Cleric cantrips. Don't worry about selecting any of these other ones here. You will see that there are no additional clerics that show up there, and by default, I do believe cantrips don't fall under a domain, so you won't find any under there. The only place you'll see them is under the cleric grouping here. Once you have selected one of the cantrips, so in this particular case, I'm going to take Guidance, for example, all you have to do is drag and drop it to your Actions tab, and it will become available to you. And I'm also going to take Toll the Dead, just for something a little bit different. But that's it. That's all you have to do. The spells, once they're dropped into place, should automatically be set up to make use of the Paladin's Charisma modifier. And we can prove that by checking what the DC value is here. Right now it's a DC 18. If I go and temporarily increase my Charisma score, we should see that that will change to a DC 19, which is what we want. If I make a change to the Wisdom, it should be still at a DC 18 check. Excellent. That means that Fantasy Grounds has properly set up both of those cantrips to make use of our Charisma modifier. But that takes care of configuring our cantrips and making sure that they're ready for use. So let's move on to Blind Fighting. The Blind Fighting style gives your character a means to limit disadvantage rolls when fighting while blind or in total darkness, and potentially even see invisible characters. This style essentially allows your character to know where someone or something is within a 10-foot range of where your character is currently standing, and thus attack them without rolling any disadvantage, when in darkness, when your character is blind, or if the target happens to be invisible. This, of course, only works if the target your character is attempting to hit did not manage to succeed on any stealth check while they were invisible, or is not behind total cover. Your character is basically using all of their senses to figure out where the target is, thereby removing the disadvantage roll that you would normally suffer if your character was blind or in total darkness. However, it does not guarantee a hit as a result of that. It's still left up to the rolls of the dice. To help counter any disadvantage that might be applied to your character due to darkness or due to being blind, it's best to actually make use of the ADV and DIS options that you have down here at the bottom left of your screen. If there is a darkness or a blindness effect that has been applied to your character and it is active, when you make your attack roll, you want to make sure that you click the ADV button here to cancel out any disadvantage that would automatically be applied. But if the Dungeon Master is making use of a theater of mind aspect to any of the effects that would be normally applied to your character, you simply leave this unchecked. And the reason for that is you're simply canceling out the statement that disadvantage should be applied as opposed to actually canceling out that effect, if you will. But there still is the situation that you might be attacking someone or something that is invisible. And if that particular creature managed to actually succeed on their stealth check, you're still going to be attacking that particular target with disadvantage. So the rules the Dungeon Master is going to throw at you is going to be essentially how you're going to play it. If they say you need to roll with disadvantage, and you say, but I have blind fighting, I cancel it under this condition and this condition, but they still state you need to roll with disadvantage, you know the target is essentially stealthy and managed to succeed on their particular stealth roll. But beyond that, there is nothing else we really need to do when it comes to setting up blind fighting in relation to our Actions tab, because we're going to make use of the convenience features already in place. The final fighting style your character is going to gain access to is called Interception, and this allows your character to reduce incoming damage to a party member or NPC or creature that your character is attempting to protect. To execute this style, your character will essentially need to be using a shield or wielding simple or martial-based weapons, and this is what will be used in the attempt to deflect the damage after the target was actually hit. And in this particular case, we can set up an action in our Actions tab to be able to take that into account. So let's go ahead and do that. First, we're going to drag this into place, and it's going to be in the base Paladin grouping here. And what we want to do is remove this damage effect. And we want to do remove action. We then want to create a new action. And this will be an effect. Setting up the effect itself isn't overly complicated, but there are a couple of gotchas that you're going to want to make sure you're aware of. First, we're going to call this Interception, just so that the Dungeon Master will know what it is that we are making use of. Then you'll want to add in a semicolon, and we want to reduce the incoming damage that the character, creature, or NPC that your character is trying to protect is going to be receiving. So we want to go DMG : We then want to use a minus 1d10 as the amount of damage coming off. And then we want to make sure that we ensure we're dealing with our proficiency bonus here. To do that, what we want to do is put a space, square bracket, minus PRF, square bracket. And that closes off the entire statement. The square brackets are required because you're going to be substituting a ability, or in this case, the proficiency, into place. And that's what the square bracket denotes in this particular case. The minus symbol has to be inside of the square bracket in order for the PRF bonus reference, instead of it being a +6, it turns it into a -6. So the total statement will be minus 1d10 minus 6, so that if we rolled a 6 on our 1d10 roll, we would have a total of minus 12. So how would this work in a combat scenario? Well, what you would do is you would be within the combat tracker, and let's say this particular zombie was hitting this particular ape. And in fact, I'll make sure that that's what that ape or zombie has targeted. I'm then going to make an attack roll with the zombie. And in this particular case, it's going to be a miss, but let's see if I can get a hit. There we go. That'll be a hit. Now what you can do is this. It'll be on next roll for the expiration for this. You can pick up this effect and drop it onto this particular zombie. Now when they roll their damage, the total amount of damage that they will do will either be 0 or some value less than our total die roll there, up to a lower point of 0, as much as that is contradictory of a statement. So when I roll the damage for this particular character, or zombie, you see a couple of dice got rolled there. The d6 was the damage die for the zombie itself. The other die was the d10, and in this particular case, we had 3 points of damage plus 1 for the total damage done by the zombie, but we rolled an 8 on the die roll, subtracting 6, meaning that we took 14 points off the total amount of damage, bringing it down to 0. So when the damage exceeds the amount of damage reduced, you're still going to have some damage done to the target. But if the damage reduction roll is higher than what the amount of damage that the target did to your protectee, if you will, it will simply be 0 damage. This is working the way that we want it to. And that completes everything we need to do for the fighting style options feature there. In addition to your fighting styles, your character is also going to gain additional spells through the additional Paladin spells feature gained at level 2. There are an additional 5 spells that your character can now choose from, and these are in complement to the existing list of spells that your character already has access to, such that you can choose from this list or from the normal spell list when adding your spells to your character. And as you can see, there are 3 second level spells, 1 new 3rd level spell, and 1 new 5th level spell that you can choose from when you're adding the spells to your actual character sheet. When your character gains levels, you will be able to select spells from this table and from the original Paladin spells table at that time. But Paladins also have the ability to change spells out when they complete a long rest, and this is because of how they require their spells. So all your character has to do, if they want to change out the spells that they have, is execute a long rest, and then when they're complete with that rest, they can choose the new spells, or you can choose their new spells. The only restriction to that is that that does not apply to cantrips. Cantrips can only be changed when your character gains levels, and this is because cantrips are essentially your quote-unquote training spells, so you've used them so frequently they're ingrained into your character. And as a result, your character is essentially going to be practicing a new cantrip at the time that you're making the change when you gain a new level. Essentially, it means that for the entirety of the previous level that you just went through, your character was practicing that particular cantrip that you just selected. But as normal, in order to select a spell, all you have to do is simply drag and drop it into place. So if I wanted to choose a new 2nd level spell, for example, I would just drop it into place. And if I didn't want this spell anymore, I would just simply remove it. And that's how that works. The next new feature your character is going to gain happens to be at level 3, and this is called Harness Divine Power. And what this does is it gives your character an additional option when making use of the Channel Divinity feature. Much like the Cleric, the Channel Divinity feature itself is provided by your class specialization, in this case, the Paladin's Oath. However, you're still gaining this capability to add in this new option at that time, regardless of the specialization that your character has selected or that you have chosen for your character. And if you happen to watch the additional options for the Cleric class, this Harness Divine Power feature behaves exactly the same way that it does for that class. And what it does is it allows your character to choose to use a Channel Divinity point to regain a spent spell slot. So for example, let's say that we had actually gone through the process of casting a 1st level spell. We now have the ability to make use of Channel Divinity, which I don't seem to see anywhere on this particular character. Ah, that's because this character doesn't have a class specialization. So 1 second, I will return. So I've loaded up a Paladin of Devotion. And unlike Clerics, Paladins only get to use the Channel Divinity feature once per short rest. This means that at most, your character might be able to make use of this 2 to 3 times a day. It also means that your character is going to have to make a choice that could be a little bit more painful than what a cleric might have to make in relation to their Harness Divine Power utilization. And what I mean by that is in relation to a cleric, at higher levels, they can get up to 3 uses of Channel Divinity per short rest under conditions. If they have used Harness Divine Power, one of those points, if they only used 1 point, is no longer accessible to them until they get a long rest completed. But they still have access to 2 points throughout the course of that day. A Paladin only has the 1 point. So if they have chosen to make use of the Harness Divine Power, they do not get the ability to take a short rest and gain access to Channel Divinity again. They have to complete a long rest before they can gain access to any of the Channel Divinity features. That's what I mean by slightly painful. Now, the maximum level of spell slot that your character will be able to potentially recover is level 3, and that's because at max level, the highest proficiency bonus your character is going to increase is +6 naturally, which means 3rd level is about as high as you can potentially recover. However, if you have a magic item that does in fact increase your proficiency bonus past 6, you could theoretically uncover a 4th level spell slot. So there's a bit of a confusing element when it comes to this particular feature. A Paladin only gets 1 use of Channel Divinity. At least that's what the consensus around the community is. So how can the Paladin make use of the Harness Divine Power twice at level 7, or 3 times when they're level 15 or higher? That's the confusing bit. So if you have any comments on that, feel free to drop them in the comment section below the video. I'm curious as to what your thoughts are in relation to that. Now, for the Paladin, this doesn't necessarily need to be added to the Actions tab because it's essentially extending your Channel Divinity. So when you make use of Channel Divinity, its option or use goes away. If, however, someone is able to argue that a Paladin should get 3 uses of Channel Divinity, then it might make sense to look at the Cleric video that I've already provided and set things up the way that I've done that there. And I'll make sure to drop a link to the Cleric video where I do discuss this in the description below. Now, the last new feature that your character is going to gain is called Martial Versatility, and this happens at level 4, but is essentially reusable again at levels 8, 12, 16, and 19. And this is the retraining feature that I was referring to earlier in the video because it allows your character to change the fighting style you have selected for your character whenever your character gains a new ability score improvement feature. It doesn't replace the ability score improvement feature, so you still get that, but you do also have the ability now to change your fighting style at the same time. This means that your character can essentially change their fighting style up to 5 times before they can no longer make that change. So you might want to take that into consideration when you're swapping out your fighting style option. And the last thing that I want to go over is around the default retraining capabilities that are available to the Paladin and how you can use them for your character. While this class does have a retraining feature, it only covers the fighting style changing capabilities that your character has now learned. If you decide to change a skill proficiency or even your entire subclass, you will end up utilizing the default rules provided by Tasha's Cauldron of Everything to do this, and to handle those particular changes. And to understand how that works, I highly recommend watching the introduction video that I've got linked in the description below, as it is included in the end of that particular video. And this brings us to our conclusion, in the sense that it is nice to see that the Paladin is now given additional fighting styles that they can make use of, has some additional spells that round out the spell selection quite nicely, and the new capability within the Channel Divinity feature to be able to recoup spell slots if they get used. I don't see that as being overly powered, and this will help to ensure that the Paladin remains relevant throughout one or more campaigns that you're planning on taking your character through, and gives you more choice when it comes to the overall fighting styles your character now has as your character matures. However, this does bring us to the end of this particular video, and I thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comment section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.